Hello, I'm Cody Matushik,
I'm Rod Montag.
and we are the movie reviewers, and we have a mini review for you today. It is the movie Clerks by Kevin Smith.
This movie it comes out in 1994. It was written and directed by one Kevin Smith, who had to borrow heavily and borrow from friends and family to actually produce and create this movie. He's the writer, he's the director, he's the producer. He actually borrowed his old boss's store to actually film this film. And it's hard to actually say what the film is, so I'm going to just give a brief overview of that. Essentially, it's about two young men in their 20s who basically find themselves adrift socially in their lives, and they oversee respectively a video store and a kind of convenience store. And the film is essentially meditations on the life of 90 Gen Xers and the guilelessness and the driftness of their lives, where they cannot find direction. And they heavily focus on material culture and popular culture and finding deeper meaning about their lives. There's a lot of pseudo-psychoanalytical conversations that are had in an attempt to find deeper meaning. The 1990s, let's just talk about the 1990s a little bit from a cinematic perspective. This became the age of the psychologist, or pseudo-psychology, where everybody thought that they could solve all their problems through medication and therapy. This was the age that if we could talk it out, hug it out, fight it out, whatever, we could figure it all out. And nobody was worse at that than the Gen Xers. And I am a Gen Xer. I talk for a living. That should tell you something right there, okay? That's what I do. I'm a historian. I talk for a living, okay? A lot. So part of what you see is the effort through meditations about popular culture, which is the primary form of knowledge for many Gen Xers, is that they draw their lessons from popular culture, from movies and television, to gain life lessons. And you see that with these two characters, okay, Randall and Dante. And we come to understand and reflect ourselves better as 90s kids. And this is a very period film about the 1990s Gen Xers. It does not play as well to the baby boomers, it does not play as well to the millennials, but it does play to that generation. And I think if you can connect to the experiences of that generation, this movie is off the charts spectacular. If you cannot, this movie is an exercise in rhetoric and obnoxious characters, in my view.
Yes, I definitely agree with that assessment, because if you aren't familiar or you don't enjoy the reference points or know 90s culture, you're going to be lost watching this.
The film is The film is more of an exercise in rhetoric and behaviors and action than it is an actual plot line, I would say. The plot line about breaking up and being with your girlfriend are nothing in the storyline. But the film is really about fascinating about that the only basic meanings that we find really in life are through relationships.
Yes.
And what's interesting is that the relationships you find are homeo in nature. They are man to man or woman to woman in nature. It's not about finding the perfect mate. It's about finding the perfect. What does he say? Silent Bob's partner say? My hetero life mate.
Yes.
My hetero life mate, Silent Bob, and that's kind of what you said. There's a brotherhood that occurs in this movie, and and one could argue to a certain extent that there are, and we can discuss this certainly, that there might be underlying homosexual themes within the film, to some extent. That's possible.
Oh yes, definitely.
And by the way, that's not a fault of the movie. I think that's a strength of the movie in a way. I think it can do that cleverly, much cleverer than he does in his later movies, unfortunately. But the film basically is about companionship that is not geared or based around sexual attraction, but geared and based around mutual companionship. The closest relationships are between friends. Randall and Dante, Silent Bob and Jay, these people who are tied to each other even as they're trying to figure their lives out.
And another thing that Rodney didn't point out is it is Rando and Dante's friendship, because they're both just floating. They're in their 20s. They don't know what they want to do. You can tell that Rando really doesn't want to be there. He
doesn't want to work.
He doesn't want to work at all.
Well, one's obsessed with trying to find purpose in his life. The other is obsessed with not finding purpose in his life.
He just wants to get high and be left alone.
And that's a real element to their relationship, is that they want different things in life, but they rely upon each other implicitly in their times of crisis and need. And in other words, one's always looking to the future, the other is not interested in the future at all, but they rely upon each other heavily in the present. And the rhetoric, and I mentioned rhetoric, and it's the dialogue that shines in this movie, and that's the thing we're going to, I think, spend some time talking about here, is the conversations that they have are conversations that you have with people who are clever. It's the kind of conversations where you have these conversations every day with your friends, but never quite this clever.
Right.
You know what I mean, and that's what's cool about it, is that the conversations are every day, but never pedestrian. And there are many great one-liners that come out of this movie from everybody's mouth. I've quoted them. Cody has quoted them. I don't want to be here today.
I'm not supposed to be here.
Trust me, I've said that on more than one occasion, no doubt.
What do you mean by you're not coming in?
37. So we do have to talk about, however, because I talked about underlying potential homoerotic themes. That's what I was trying to say earlier. I just never got the word out. But there is a thing we have to look at, is the portrayal of women in this. What would you say to how he portrays women in an effort to portray this male companionship?
He shows that the two ladies in it do rely heavily on each other, because the one is struggling with, do I want to stay with this boyfriend I've been with for years? Okay. We knew each other in high school, or
is that the college one, the college-bound one?
Yes.
Okay.
Or should I just bag it, say goodbye and head off and start the college party life?
Yeah, but also, man, because you have the one girlfriend, the ex-girlfriend of Dante's, who's kind of a good-time girl, not very faithful, and the other one who wants Dante to figure his life out.
Yes.
I mean, do you think that these are good portrayals of women or effective portrayals? Let's use the word effective. Are these effective portrayals of women?
When it's just the two girls talking together, it is effective, but representation of women. When it's one of them talking to like Dante, it is not, because they just start basically gibbering at him, being nonsensical at times.
Yeah, I had a big problem in this movie when it came to the depiction of women. I thought the women, as depicted in this film, were shrewish. And there was an effort to try to create these as sexually liberated women, where we shouldn't be ashamed that women like sex, women like orgasms. And that notion of sexual liberation, I thought, came off very superficial in this movie.
Oh, it was.
Because basically, the way you determine that these are sexually liberated women is that they have lots of sexual contact. A lot. And they have it anywhere, anytime, anyway. And to me, that doesn't represent sexual liberation. I don't care whose gender it is, I don't think it really represents any sort of sexual liberation of the character. So I thought that was a very weak device used to portray both women, in my view, in different ways. Because that's true. I mean, both women engage in some sort of sexual activity.
Oh yeah.
In the movie, off screen, but the conversation about it really just tends to make them seem that they just like to sleep around,
and it's obscene.
It is. I mean, it's not a liberation for women. So I think that Kevin Smith really struggles to write women, in my view, in this portrayal of what is a very male-centric film. Okay? And that's not to say that women can't enjoy this film. I think many women I do know enjoy this movie, but it's for the clever dialogue, not for the portrayal of women. But it's certainly an experience, and there are some hilarious conversations, and there's also a commentary on the 1990s consumerism, too. How we are obsessed with consumerism, buying and purchase of goods, since it centers around an area of commerce, which is, in this case, the convenience store.
Yep.
And dealing with the everyday people. What do you mean? I gotta drink this coffee hot? And it's a slice of life comedy, if that makes sense. Okay? It is in black and white, And I think that choice was made because, one, it was very in vogue in 1992, black and white movies that became artsy and became a thing. But I think also, he would show, and this is my opinion on the film, a timelessness. To, even though, like we said, it's very of its time, there's a timelessness in terms of trying to show just a slice of an everyday working person's life.
And to add to that, actually, Kevin Smith said that what gave him the idea to shoot it in black and white was the Soul Asylum. Runaway Train,
yeah.
Because that was completely in black and white, and he was just enthralled with how it was filmed.
Yeah, it gives, because black and white is oftentimes, if you grow up in the 1970s, many documentaries and footage that you watched came out of black and white footage. And so black and white always had a sense of reality that maybe color did not necessarily have. So it made it seem more quote-unquote real. And this became the 1990s an age when the docudrama and the fictional docudrama style became a thing for a while. And black and white was a way to give credence to whatever you were filming. Let's talk now, because we're coming to a quick end again to our mini review. What final thoughts do you have in regards to this movie, and why people still to this day refer back to it over 20-some years later?
Because, honestly, it's because of Dante and Rando's friendship, because they're just chatting like normal nerds. Like, they're referencing Star Wars. They're referencing Indiana Jones, random TV shows,
right? Which
any Gen Xer can relate to.
Certainly, well, that's certainly the case. It's a movie, I think, of a generation, for a generation, and well worth watching for that generation. Now, we don't do number reviews on this, guys. We do it by should see, must see, never see again, and see if you're bored. What would you rate this?
Should see.
Should see. I would say should see with the caveat, if you are somebody who grew up in the 80s and 90s, and, even in the early 2000s, that this would be worth seeing. But I think for a baby boomer, unless you're really into counterculture comedy, it's not worth your time. I would say skip it. Don't bother seeing it. I think it's for a group of people of its time and for its time. Anyway, thank you guys very much. I'm Rod Montag.
I'm Cody Matuszek.
And we are the Movie Reviewers.